your daily TA wrap. We take a look at these markets. We do it from a neoclassical perspective, each time asking ourselves what happened today and what does it tell us about the coming ones. I do this show 4 times a week, Monday through Thursday, live at 9 o'clock Eastern Time here from the base of the beautiful Rocky Mountains. Folks, it was a inside day on the markets. We got a push to the upside, and inside. NDX was up the most, 0.75. Russell just barely moved. The Russell, as I've said many times, has been our best indicator for a while now, so the fact that this doesn't move, if we don't see movement tomorrow, it's going to be kind of a little bit worrisome, in my opinion. We saw gold unwilling to back down. And if we look at the dollar's down 0.25%, not huge, but down, and still holding in there. So for the most part, you know, the market did kind of what you would expect. Last time we talked about there was a good potential this thing was going to try to pull back in, push back up a little bit, get a bounce. That's what we got. We got a bounce. Nothing special about the bounce itself, though. Just a so-so bounce, so to speak. Let's look at some of the sectors, the indexes, see what they look like. And let's, of course, start with what we usually do, which is the S&P 500. So if we look at the S&P, it's just a normal inside day. There's really nothing here. So you came back, you push back in, you have a little volume expansion as you come back into this. Remember, we were coming into 2 big bars, though. That was what we were talking about last night. More than likely, this thing was going to flip around, and that is what it did. And let me change the color on this. So when we came into these 2 bars, right, the volumes there were pretty high, and we thought that we would, you know, because we came in with decent volume but not enough, we thought it would turn around and bounce. That's what it did. Tomorrow, it's going to try to test this high. That's going to be the key spot tomorrow. So right now, you know, when you think about it, you really have this as your range. That's your range. When it breaks out one side or the other, and if I could actually get my tools to work right, when it breaks out one side or the other, either to the top side or to the downside, you know, that's when we're going to find out something more. Right now, didn't tell me anything today. Yeah, you got to bounce, you're inside, who cares? NDX looks almost exactly the same, really nothing different here. It has a little volume escalation itself yesterday, but still nothing significant. And then today, you know, inside day. Composite the same. I would note that the composite didn't bounce as big. What has been our 2 weakest sector? Russell, composite. They are the weakest again. And the Russell we talked about couldn't even move, a little doji inside day. This one is not a happy camper. We still could get the bounce, right? I mean, it's not, you know, doesn't tell us it's going to fail, but that's a weak bounce. You get another day of that, that's not a good sign. So index-wise, you know, there's nothing here to tell us anything about what's next from the indexes themselves, right? From day to day, right? I mean, you know, I make these calls longer than just a day, but, you know, I always focus on what to look for in the coming day because I trade that way, and I think if you stay on the right side of the trade, you're going to be a lot better off in the long term. So nothing here to tell me, but if I step back to what I always tell you, and that is that if you look at the general trend, what is it? The general trend is up. It's not down. It's up across all time frames, all sectors, you know, all indexes, and most stocks, or a vast majority of the stocks. And so when you have that, if you're going to err, you got to err on the side of the trend. You can't fight against it. So if you're going to make an error here, you make it to the long side. You don't make it on the short side. When you're looking strictly at something that's not giving you an indication, which is what the indexes are doing tonight. We'll see if they can push up a little bit more tomorrow. I don't know that they will. It looks to me like this is a stalemate, and you're going to have earnings decide this. And you got the big earnings coming out. I didn't look at the calendar yet, but I'm pretty sure Thursday or Friday, I think it's probably Friday morning, Wells Fargo and JP Morgan usually come out at the end of the week. IYT, just hanging at the highs, nothing special there. SOX we thought would bounce, we did. The SOX was a good signal last night for a bounce. That's what we got. We were coming into these bars that was in this area. You can see it tested in there, had nothing. Bounce was the obvious play, and that's what we got. And this one looks like it stayed over it. Top there was 87.76, and it did. So that one actually tells you it's going to try to test the top again. And remember, we actually have an 89.88 target still out here on the SOX. And so we still could push up that high. That's on the weekly. And we potentially are going to set up an ABCD structure here to get there. Right? You can see that kind of setting up there. So that's the SOX. That would take it to its target on the weekly, if in fact it can push up. Given the action today, it did get over it. It stayed over it. That says it can test the top, and that says it could make that run. So SOX is actually bullish. Let's look at the XLB. So XLB just hanging. So that looks like the IYT. Really nothing there. XLE. Actually surprisingly strong today. I thought it would be weaker. So XLE still hanging. That one is okay as well, but doesn't really tell us much. These are all inside days. XLF actually looked pretty weak today, still does. XLI has been weak, also looks weak today. Not much there. It's not, again, not telling us anything. XLK was looked like it was going to bounce, and does. This one also, you know, if you go back, last night we talked about this one coming into the swing point high. That was a retest regen. And even though it was within 6 bars, the probabilities were decent it was going to hold, because your volume here compared to what it was testing into wasn't much. And actually it wasn't testing directly into this. It was testing here, but this was the breakout bar. And then that volume is on this bar just underneath it. So you could see the value of that support zone. Came into it, bounced off inside day. This one probably is going to test that breakdown bar now, just because of the way it's set up yesterday. Because the day doesn't tell you that. XLP just grinding back up. So nothing negative here. XLU, that's actually negative on the XLU, over under, and that one had a big sell-off. This one may try to pull back tomorrow. Now the XLU has been going opposite of the rest of the market. So if the XLU does start to come off tomorrow, that could portend the rest of the market trying to be strong. So XLU maybe giving us a decent signal there. XLV inside day, nothing there. And let's see about the XLY. Wow, what happened here? Why all this volume? I don't know. Let's see if we can figure out why, though. Let me pop back over. So if I go to the shared watch list that we have for the XLY, we can take a quick look inside and see what it looks like. So the big volume guys in here, they're fairly evenly distributed. Comcast is one of them. Comcast got a nice big push up. No special volume there. Amazon still hanging all right. Disney was okay volume. So I don't see anything special here. Home Depot is another one. Nothing there. McDonald's, nothing there. So looks like for some reason somebody thinks that XLY is going to do something. They put a lot of volume into it today. Let's look at the OX markets. So sectors, not telling us a lot either. Again, you got to defer to the trend though. Let's look at the EEM. I'm curious as to if it went up, and it did. Gets over the high, 44.19, and closes under it. And it did 266, she did 298, has more volume. Going to try it again tomorrow. So that still looks fine. The Frontier market, which is a little more risky, actually got a decent push today with a bad candle. So that one's kind of so-so. Looking at the currencies right quick, FXE trying to come back up. So now the big question here, and this is the way this always, or not always, but many times sets up, is do we have the potential ABCD structure to the downside to get us back to these lows setting up? Or is this on a weekly, is this thing setting up to go higher? In other words, is it doing an ABCD structure to the upside? So if I look at it on the weekly, I could make the case that potentially this thing is doing an ABCD structure up. And so a lot of times you see these kind of conflicting signals. If I look at the upside, that doesn't look like it's going to do it. If I look at it on the daily, if I look at it on the weekly, it doesn't look like it's going to do it. If I look at it on the daily, it also doesn't look like it's going to do it. So I would still think this is going to try to push down. Let's quickly look at gold and silver. So gold tests the top again, doesn't have the volume, falls back. That's a failure again at the highs. Gold just can't quite get over it. Let's see what silver did. Silver's still hanging at the highs. Wow, it's hard to go against those two markets. They seem extended, but what they're doing is they're working it off in terms of time instead of price. TLT goes over, back under, has slightly less volume. That one may try to retrace tomorrow. That would be probably negative for the markets. One of my trader friends is asking me to look at UNG and look at natural gas. So natural gas, let's see what it's doing. So it broke two swing point lows. So that usually says that you're going to get an extension 2 to 3 bars, right? So this is bar 1. 2 to 3 bars out here somewhere. And that could be just, sideways extension bars. They don't have to actually go down, but usually they do. The cases that they don't go down typically have to do with something like you see here, and that is that you have a lot of volume in this price zone. You can see it here, off of that bottom of that bar. You can see it as a result of this, these green bars that you have. But it's right in this area. That's really a lot of support. And it happens to be a retest off of this high, although it was tested once before already. It looks like to me it's just testing again. It also appears to have finished an ABCD structure down. So there's multiple things here saying that it's probably going to hold and go sideways, but I think you kind of want to wait and let it do that, because more than likely it's going to hang down here, and then if it does, then you might get that push back up. So I'd be patient. Let it try to work sideways for another bar at least and see what it does. UNL probably looks the same, which is 6 months instead of just the 1. Yeah, it looks about the same. And it's a different setup on the weekly. And also a better one. 1934. Yeah, that does look like it's going to test that low on the the UNG is the front month. This is the 6 months, and that looks like it's going to test it. So yeah, I'd let it test. Let's see what oil looks like. Wow. So it doesn't look like Iraq's a concern anymore, does it? Looks like they made them give it up today, right? Volume expands. So you filled. Remember yesterday or I don't know if it was yesterday, but we were talking about this retest regen. And this is how you can see how important it was. It's retesting and trying to regenerate higher. When it fails, gaps down today, what happens? All the volume comes out of it, right? They just blow it out, right? So all these people that were trying to be bullish up here, right, that bought it wherever, they're all underwater, and they all started giving up today. That's why you can see the volume expansion. So that will probably carry a little bit farther, come down into these lows. 37.25. Yeah. Not a good scene if you're trying to be long there. And let's quickly take a look at the dollar. I think the dollar is going to try to hold here. A little bit of volume coming out of it today. Tomorrow will be a critical day on the dollar. We'll see if it holds or not. Let's see what the overseas markets look like. And I'm doing this all with you because I didn't actually do it today. I was doing a show right before this one, so I didn't do my prep today. Let's see what the world markets look like. So the big concern has been over in Europe, and that was the CAC. Remember, it was trying to finish up an ABCD, and look at it. It finishes at almost to the dollar. It does a hammer reversal. This thing's going to bounce again tomorrow. And so that's actually good for our markets. That's going to help our markets stay strong, right? Because Europe's going to bounce. So you had an ABCD structure to the downside, and you can see how it finished almost exactly to the dollar, and you get a hammer reversal. So you get a bounce out of this, and then of course the test is going to be as it comes back into this resistance zone now, starting right here, and that's where we'll see, you know, are the buyers willing to pay up to get back into this thing when they hit places where sellers should show up? And so that will be a key area. That will be a good tell as it does that. Now let's see what the FTSE did. The FTSE also was down towards the bottom of the range. It tests the bottom, doesn't have the volume. This one also is going to try to lift tomorrow. And the DAX, which is the strongest group, under, back over, holds the retest regen zone again. And did it test that low or not? 974, 975, didn't quite get to it. They jumped the gun and jumped into it. This one's also going to bounce tomorrow. So you have bounces in Europe, it looks like. Let's see what Asia looks like. So if I go over, start with China. China, the H shares, wow, now they came off, didn't they? So big sell-off there last night. Okay, so what are you coming back into? Where's the test? The test is back into support. So it gets up, it didn't quite test the top, tried to. Goes back up there, hangs 3 bars to try to test again, can't do it, comes off hard, but the volume is not that bad as it comes back in. And so this actually, as strange as it looks, this looks like it is going to bounce tonight because it held this volume bar right there on the way back, tested it, doesn't have the volume. Probably going to flip around and get an inside bar today just like our markets did. Let's see what the Hong Kong did. So they were over the highs. Okay, so they're doing the retest regen immediately. So what does that mean? It breaks above this swing point high. That's what this arrow is telling you. Gets above it, stays up there, but not more than 6 bars. And that says the probabilities are lower that it will hold. And it's doing a retest regen. It did almost a full retest regen tonight. That breakout bar had this amount of volume on it. So you can see the volume on the way up, higher than the volume on the way back, and you're at the bottom of that retest zone. This one too is going to try to bounce tonight. I would expect it maybe does the same thing as we did, and that's an inside bar. And let's look at the Nikkei. They came off again and turned around, about the same volume. This one's going to go back up and try to test these highs, 15,422. And let's look at the Taipei market. That one's just hanging. So if I look at all of those, Asia and Europe look like they're going to bounce. That's going to probably put a little bit of, it's going to keep us at least even in the morning, maybe up depending on how much they bounce. And then we'll see if our markets can move higher. So if you defer to the trend and the general fact that the overseas markets are going to try to work harder tonight, that gives you a decent setup to try to extend a little bit more tomorrow. But as they come back up, and I'm going to flip back over real quick, and then I'll go to your questions. And if you have questions, you want to write me support@TA Today. I'll try to take it from there. Or if you want to type them into the text box. I don't have my the text messaging with me, so you can't text message me tonight. I'm going to miss it if you do. Let me go back. I was going to go back to the general markets. So if I go back here, I want to look at the S&P because that's the strongest one. The test tomorrow will be this high, 1976.39. If you get over it, you can go right back up and test the top again. If you can't, that's a pretty good indication that this is going to try to come down and test lower again. And that will test right into support because it will set up a little ABCD structure downside probably. Okay, let's see what kind of questions we got here and see if I might be able to answer them. Freddie says, thanks LA. I assume that was from something from last night. G Willie Man, SLW. Let's see what SLW looks like. So this is Silver Wheaton. It's a silver play. And actually, it's not just silver. I think they also do platinum, if I remember right. It's a great extension. 20 to 27 in 2 months. How can you grab about that? 30+% gain in 2 months. Okay, so you had a nice big spike up. Volume comes into it today. You're breaking out again. Let's see what the weekly looks like on this guy. SLW. All right, so you're coming up to the swing point high. So that high has 19.8. And today is Wednesday. So it's going to have the volume. It's extended, but it's going to have the volume. 27.25, 27.14, 27.68. Well, this is going to test into this resistance zone, and I suspect, given how big of a drive straight up it is, it's going to fail in this zone, and then it's finally going to give you the pullback. So if you're wanting to buy it, which I assume you are, let it test in there and just be patient and wait on it to come back. Because, you know, I've said this before, and I'll repeat it here again. You know, think about your reward to risk. What are you going to do? You buy it here, its target is about 60 cents higher. Are you going to flip this thing for 60 cents? Probably not. You're probably going to hang on to it and say, oh, well, it can go higher, right? And so your reward to risk just isn't there, because if it pulls back, where's your support zones on the shortest term time frame, the daily? Where's your support zones? Well, this one and that one, they're back $1 lower, $2 lower. And they can easily come back to those areas and still make it even more bullish. It would be more bullish, right? Because then you'd have a big ABCD structure in play. So at this point, you just have to let it come back. Yeah, see, it doesn't even have an ABCD in place yet. That's amazing. So from here, if I'm looking at it, you know, a projection basis, right? You have an A point here, and there isn't a B point yet. It's still straight up. So if you just think about a pullback into this area, how far does that take you? Well, it takes you off the screen, right? It takes you another $7 higher, or it won't be that much. It'd be another $5 higher. It takes you to 30. Where's 30? You know, assuming it dips that low. Well, 30's the highs. That would make sense. Is it going to get up there straight away? Odds are not good. Probably not. Be patient. It will come back. You'll get your trade on. And you'll have a higher probability because you'll be able to see how it comes back. And more than likely, it's going to set up a good buy when it does. Okay. Let me see. Let me take a drink. My mouth is dry. I've been talking for an hour and a half. Thank you. Okay, so what do we got here? Let's, while we have a chance, since we're wondering, and actually while I'm here, let me look at one more thing. Let me pop up the trading cube on this guy. Yeah, look at that. I mean, this is the place to be. If this is a turn, and I don't mean this particular stock, but the GDX itself, if this is really the turn, right, that we've been waiting on, right, you got a lot of room to run. A lot of room to run, right? You're sideways and bearish. You're bearish, right? There's just a lot of room to run higher. And so we're in the early stages of what could be a much larger run if, in fact, this is the turn. We don't quite know that yet. We've got to wait because that data is just not there for us yet. But if this is the turn, it's going to be potentially a big one, and you don't have to rush it. And if I pull the GDX up, let me grab the GDX. Bear with me a second. So if I pull the GDX up, I'm going to have to go to another screen. Here, I'll just do it by hand. And I'm pulling up on the weekly. Yeah, this is the same setup. So you just have to let it die down and come back, and then you'll trade off that setup. Because right now you just haven't done anything, right? Still bearish. It's pretty amazing, huh? Still bearish after a 20% run. That's how beat up this thing has been. But when this thing turns, it's going to be a big turn, and you're going to want to be on that side of it, because it could be, you know, a 2-year run up instead of a 2-year run down, which it's been. Okay, what I was going to go do, and I'm going to do now, is I'm going to pull this over, and I'm going to pull up the, actually I didn't want this. I actually want to go to, I want to go to my bookmarks and pull up this guy. Earnings. I want to know when the earnings are coming up for JP Morgan and I could have gone into the trading cube to find it, but it's easier to do them both here. July 15th. So that's actually next week on JP Morgan. Let's see about Wells Fargo. It's the 11th. So the 11th is Friday. So Wells Fargo, which is the strongest one, is Friday. If I work backwards here, I don't see any other big ones. So the only big number still this week is Wells Fargo, it looks like. Yeah. And then next week, next week you start getting into a bunch of numbers. So if I am looking at the 14th and just starting to go down the list here, you can see, you usually get a lot of finance companies at the beginning. Charles Schwab will give you some sense of what the broker-dealers are doing. Here's Citigroup. And you just go down the list, right? It's going to start getting heavy next week. And that's going to be the tell. That's what's going to move this market, up or down. And if you think about it, the market has moved up into the news. It's not as if it's not discounting it. It already is. The question is will it continue to move up? Will the news be that good or not? If you get some major earnings out that are not bullish, right, especially those that come out the first 2 weeks, and I'm talking about next week and the week after, this market's going to take a tumble, right, because they built it in. And that's where we're at. So there's risk here. Be aware of that. At the same time, realize that the trend is up. You gotta err on the side of the trend. So you still gotta lean long until there's a reason not to. And so far, this market hasn't given us a reason. Folks, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. Take care of yourself. Have a great night, and I'll catch you next time. I'm LA. This is and it was your your daily TA wrap. You can tell I'm getting tired. Have a great night. I'll see you next time.